Sophia Miller gripped the stack of documents in her hands as she stepped into Grand Oak Bank, her pulse thrumming with nervous energy. The air was thick with the sterile scent of paper and polished wood, the rhythmic tapping of keyboards filling the quiet expanse of the bank lobby. She had rehearsed this meeting in her mind 100 times, but now, standing before the mahogany door marked Henry Caldwell, Senior Manager, her confidence wavered. She needed this loan desperately. Her bakery, Sweet Haven, was drowning in overdue bills, and James, her ever-supportive husband, had exhausted his own resources trying to keep them afloat. But hard work and good intentions weren't enough. Money was. And today, a man old enough to be her father held her financial future in his hands. Taking a steadying breath, she knocked. "Come in." Mr. Henry Caldwell's voice was smooth but commanding. Sophia stepped inside, greeted by a room that reeked of power, dark leather furniture, a towering bookshelf filled with economic tomes, and a desk that gleamed under the muted light. Behind it sat Henry Caldwell, his silver hair neatly combed, a pair of glasses perched low on his nose as he skimmed through a document. He looked up, his sharp blue eyes appraising her. "Mrs. Miller," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Please have a seat." Sophia sank into the plush leather, forcing herself to maintain composure. She set the neatly bound proposal before him. "Mr. Caldwell, thank you for meeting with me. I appreciate your time." He gave a polite nod and flipped open the first page. A slow, methodical silence stretched between them as he read. Sophia's heartbeat drummed in her ears. Finally he closed the file and leaned back. "Impressive business model. Your bakery has potential." Hope flickered in her chest. "Then you'll approve the loan." He exhaled through his nose, a small, knowing smile forming. "Potential doesn't guarantee stability, Mrs. Miller. The bank has concerns." Her stomach tightened. "Concerns?" He removed his glasses, folding them neatly on the desk. "Your revenue is inconsistent. Your debt-to-income ratio is high. It's risky for us." Sophia's fingers clenched in her lap. "But if I could just—" "Banking isn't just about numbers," he interrupted smoothly. "It's about relationships, trust, and sometimes—" He let the word linger, his gaze settling on her in a way that made her spine stiffen. "A willingness to be flexible." The air changed. Sophia's throat went dry. She had heard whispers, rumors exchanged between women over coffee, warnings about Henry Caldwell's methods. But she had dismissed them as exaggerations. Now, faced with his deliberate tone, his calculated pause, she wasn't so sure. Her instinct screamed at her to get up, to walk out. But then she thought of James, of the bakery they had built from nothing, of the empty accounts, the overdue rent, the silent stress that had settled into their marriage like a slow-growing cancer. She swallowed hard. "I don't understand." Caldwell's smile widened. "I think you do." A long silence followed. Sophia felt the weight of her morality pressing down on her, a suffocating force that clashed against the undeniable truth. He had power and she had none. Finally he leaned forward, his voice a low murmur. "Take the weekend. Think it over." She forced herself to stand, nodding stiffly. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Caldwell." As she walked out of his office, nausea twisted in her stomach. The door clicked shut behind her, but the suffocating weight of the unspoken deal clung to her like a second skin. She had 3 days to decide. And no good options. Sophia walked out of Grand Oak Bank with her head high, but inside, her thoughts churned in a storm of uncertainty. The city streets bustled around her, horns blaring, pedestrians weaving through traffic, but the noise barely registered. Caldwell's words echoed in her mind, their meaning curling around her like invisible chains. It's about relationships, trust, a willingness to be flexible. She tightened her grip on her purse, as if holding something tangible could anchor her against the pull of his unspoken proposition. By the time she reached home, the sun had begun its descent, casting the small apartment in a dull orange glow. She hesitated at the door, inhaling deeply before stepping inside. James sat at their modest dining table, his laptop open, a spreadsheet flickering on the screen. He looked up and smiled, a weary, hopeful smile that made her chest ache. "Hey, sophomore. How'd it go?" She set her bag down carefully, schooling her features. "It went okay." He said he'd think about it. A half-truth. Necessary lie. James ran a hand through his dark hair, exhaling. "That's something, right? Maybe we'll finally catch a break." She forced a nod. "Maybe." He pushed his laptop aside and stood, wrapping his arms around her waist. His warmth, his familiar scent of coffee and fabric softener, should have been comforting. Instead, guilt slithered through her, tightening her throat. "You okay?" he murmured against her temple. She swallowed hard. Just tired." James kissed her forehead and pulled away, returning to his work. Sophia lingered for a moment, watching him. His brows furrowed in concentration, the faint crease of exhaustion lining his face. He had been carrying the weight of their struggles for months, never once complaining. And now, she carried a burden of her own. The next morning she met Anna for coffee. Her best friend was already seated when she arrived, stirring sugar into her cappuccino with slow deliberation. Anna's sharp brown eyes flicked up the moment Sophia sat down. "You look like hell." Sophia let out a hollow laugh. "Good to see you too." Anna leaned forward, her tone softer. "How did it go?" Sophia hesitated, staring at the swirling foam in her cup. Then quietly she said, "He hinted that the loan isn't just about numbers, that it could depend on other factors." Anna's hand stilled over her cup. "You're joking." Sophia shook her head. Sharp breath. Then, "That bastard. I knew he was like that, but I never thought." "Soph, tell me you walked out." "I did." Anna exhaled, relieved. "Good. Then there's nothing to think about." But there was. Sophia bit her lip, fingers tightening around the handle of her mug. "Anna, what if this is the only way?" Anna's expression darkened. "Oh, don't even go there. We're drowning, Anna." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "The bakery, James, everything. This loan could save us." "At what cost?" The question settled between them, heavy and suffocating. Sophia rubbed her temple. "I don't know." Anna reached across the table, gripping her wrist. "Yes, you do. You just don't want to say it." Silence stretched between them. Then Anna sighed, shaking her head. "Listen to me. If you do this, it won't just be one night. Men like him don't stop at one favor. They keep collecting." Sophia knew she was right. And yet, logic and desperation were at war within her. "So what do I do?" she asked, voice raw. Anna's gaze softened. "You find another way." That night, as Sophia lay beside James, staring at the ceiling, she wished she believed there was one. But time was running out. Sleep never came. Sophia lay in bed, staring at the shadows that stretched across the ceiling, listening to the rhythmic rise and fall of James's breathing beside her. Each inhale felt like a quiet betrayal, a reminder of the decision clawing at her conscience. By dawn, exhaustion weighed heavy on her body, but clarity had not come. She slipped out of bed carefully, padding into the small kitchen where the scent of coffee lingered from the night before. She poured herself a cup, gripping it tightly as if the warmth could settle the storm inside her. Her phone buzzed. She didn't need to check to know who it was. Still, she hesitated before flipping it over. Henry Coldwell. A single message. "Have you thought about my offer?" A cold shiver traced her spine. The logical part of her screamed to ignore it. Delete the message. Look away. But the realist in her, the woman who had fought tooth and nail for every scrap of success, knew that doing the right thing didn't always mean survival. She typed out a response, fingers trembling. "I need more time." The reply came almost instantly. "Not much left to give. Meet me at my office before closing today. We'll discuss terms." As if this were nothing more than a business transaction. She set the phone down, exhaling shakily. Behind her, James stirred in the bedroom. A moment later he emerged, stretching, his eyes still heavy with sleep. He gave her a tired smile as he walked over, pressing a kiss to her cheek. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," she admitted. James poured himself coffee, leaning against the counter. "Still no word from the bank." Sophia swallowed. "Not yet." James sighed, rubbing a hand down his face. "Maybe I can pick up another shift at the warehouse. It won't be much, but it'll buy us time." A luxury they no longer had. Sophia forced a small smile. "We'll figure it out." James nodded, but the worry in his eyes remained. "I know." He kissed her forehead before heading to the bathroom. The moment the door clicked shut, Sophia released a shaky breath. She had made her decision. By late afternoon, she stood outside Caldwell's office once more, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might shatter through her ribs. The receptionist glanced up. "Mr. Caldwell is expecting you." Course he was. Sophia's hands felt ice-cold as she pushed open the door. Caldwell sat behind his desk, a picture of composed authority. His suit crisp, his expression unreadable. But there was something else in his eyes now, something knowing. He gestured toward the chair. "Sit." Sophia obeyed, her pulse thundering. Caldwell leaned back, studying her. "I assume you've made a decision." She forced herself to meet his gaze. "I need the loan." A slow smile spread across his face. "And are you willing to be flexible?" The words made her stomach turn, but she kept her expression neutral. "What exactly are your expectations?" Caldwell chuckled, shaking his head. "You're a smart woman, Sophia. I think you already know." Silence stretched between them. Then, slowly, he reached into his desk drawer, pulling out a pen and a single sheet of paper. He slid it across to her. "Sign this." Sophia frowned, glancing down. It was a confidentiality agreement. "Standard practice," he said smoothly. "Just to ensure our arrangement remains discreet." Her throat tightened. The weight of her decision pressed down on her, suffocating. This was the final moment. The point of no return. She reached for the pen. Hesitated. Her reflection stared back at her from the polished surface of his desk, and for the first time, she saw not a desperate business owner, but a woman standing at the edge of a precipice. A woman who still had a choice. And then, as if summoned by fate, her phone buzzed in her purse. He jumped. Caldwell arched a brow, but said nothing. With trembling fingers, she pulled it out. A single message from James. "Good news, my friend from college just called. He knows someone willing to invest in the bakery. We don't need the loan anymore." The breath she hadn't realized she was holding rushed from her lungs. Her vision sharpened. The walls of Caldwell's office, once closing in on her, now felt distant, insignificant. Sophia looked up, and for the first time that day she smiled. "I've changed my mind." Caldwell's expression flickered. Brief surprise, then irritation, then something else. Amusement. "Are you sure?" His tone was measured, but there was an edge to it now. Sophia stood, sliding the unsigned document back toward him. "Positive." He studied her for a long moment, then gave a slow nod. "Well, Mrs. Miller, I must say I'm disappointed. But I do admire a woman who knows her own worth." She turned to leave, gripping the doorknob. "Sophia." She froze. Caldwell's voice was softer now, almost gentle. "Not everyone gets a second chance. Next time, be careful what you bargain with." She didn't respond. Instead, she stepped out into the hallway, inhaling deeply. The air had never felt so crisp.